Welcome to the Runway, where we cover current events in crypto, Web3, and tech. It's Monday, May 20th. Let's take off. All right, guys, got a lot of stories for you today. First up on the docket, New York AG reaches $2 billion settlement with Genesis for defrauded victims. The Attorney General's office filed a lawsuit against Genesis in October 2023 for allegedly defrauding investors through the Gemini Earn program. Genesis is the holding company, I believe, for Grayscale, Bitcoin Trust, and a couple other sub companies. The one that was basically taking people's consumers' funds through the cryptocurrency trading platform Gemini, and they were then promised yield for borrowing and lending those assets. They were lending those assets through the Gemini Earn program to Genesis, who then took the assets and lended them to hedge funds and other entities. Gemini was taking their cut. Then Genesis would get their cut. They'd pass the remainder through to Gemini. Gemini would take their cut, and then they'd pass the remainder of that back to the individual consumer. Many of these yields that were promised were, ridiculous yields, 12%, 15%, 30%, extremely attractive to the average Joe. When you're lending out an asset and you're getting this yield, is because it's inherently risky, right? You're taking a risk. The riskier the loan, the higher APY will incentivize that, right? There's a bigger chance of default or a total loss. And Genesis failed spectacularly because they were lending all these funds to people who were just, trading massive amounts of leverage with these crypto assets. And eventually, when the music stopped, everybody lost it. The chairs fell out from underneath everybody, right? So, and that got carried down to retail, who was getting a percentage of that APY for engaging in that risk. If you decide to lend your assets for yield, some of that accountability falls back on you, right? You're taking a risk, and it's very good to see that there is some recovery here and that some of these funds will be returned to consumers. Right? When you enter into a loan contract and you lend something for an APY, are you really being defrauded, or are you making a business decision with your cryptocurrency to lend it for a yield, right? So nobody forced you to do this. You should have done your due diligence and done your research and realized that, hey, if I'm getting 12% on this asset, there's obviously risk there. I'm lending it out to somebody, and I'm sure that Gemini had all of those disclosures. I remember signing one I think I was on BlockFi with some of my funds, and I signed over the disclosure that I was willing to take a risk with, a very small portion of my funds to test it out. You knew what you were doing, right? You don't put all your eggs in one basket, and you can still participate and trade on these platforms without lending these funds, right, to these entities. So it's a good thing that they were able to get that $2 billion for investors and people that put their money into this Gemini Earn program. And hopefully that money will see, let's see if that money actually finds its way back to those individuals, right? As we've seen many times with some of these settlements, I was very vocal about this criticism. The SEC got this huge paycheck settlement from, BlockFi, but, where was that money going? It was going to the SEC. It wasn't going back to the individual creditors and people that had lost money. So it doesn't help anybody. A money grab to jump by these government agencies to jump the line. I believe later on they did correct that and make sure that that money went back, but this wasn't something that was apparent initially. It was like, hey, this is for our coffers to go sue more crypto companies, not, hey, this is money that came from consumers. Let's get those consumers this money back, right? I believe they did rectify that at some point later on, that money was going to go to consumers, although I'd be interested to follow up on that. Let's move along to our next story. And many of you who are looking at the markets today, you've seen, massive pricing increases in Bitcoin and Ethereum, especially Ethereum is up almost 20% at this point. But it looks like the approval of spot Ether ETFs to come down to 5-person vote this week. This article here kind of touches on that topic. And there are rumors and rumblings that the Democrat majority and Gary Gensler are going to reverse course here. It seems this is a huge political liability as we get closer to election time in the next coming months. Apparently that there's been a lot of feedback and a lot of negative energy for the Democrats when it comes to this issue and the way they've been handling it. Big surprise there. And honestly, no surprise there for many of you who've been paying attention and have seen what has been happening. We will see here what happens and how this plan plays out. Ether jumps 10%. We're almost at 3,700 now as the time of recording this video from a couple hours ago. The price has gone up a lot more, just based probably on this ETF. The fact that this ETF approval might come down, right? I think it's a huge political liability if Gary Gensler rejects this and has to go back to court. He might, or whoever the other commissioners are, I believe, Hester Pearson and other individual, I think his last name is Uyeda. I believe he is. Those are the pro innovation, pro Web3, pro crypto commissioners, and want to see that this asset treated like any other asset and just basically be on a level playing field, right? So they were the yes votes last time, and I think after Gary Gensler and the SEC lost their court case trying to prevent these Bitcoin ETFs, Gary had to reverse course and be the final vote on the approval of yes for that. Now I think that the Democrats are scrambling here because there's been a lot of pushback against the Elizabeth Warren and the anti-crypto army and Gary Gensler and Sherrod Brown and all these characters. They are considering that if they deny this thing, it could be more energy, more ammunition for the Republicans heading into this election season. It's sad to see that they've been stifling an entire industry just based on politics, and that basically this is a political football. And the only reason that they're reversing course and making the business-friendly, pro-innovation take is because we're getting close to elections and it's going to cost them dearly. This is not something they're doing willingly. So you can see here that this is kind of why these assets are spiking. Let's move along to 3 opinion pieces that I set aside here. And I think all of them are very interesting. So the first one is about AI here. AI is helping solve malnutrition. This is an opinion piece by Matt Freeman. And it kind of delves into how these tools, these Web3 tools, can help us in the future and why they are so important, right? Yes, they can be used for bad, but many of these technologies essentially are disproportionately and massively used for good. And the good is on so many different levels and so many different areas, it's hard to even quantify. But just one example here is this article about nutrition. So as I'll read a couple snippets from the article and we'll talk about it a little bit. As any good futurist will tell you, when responsibly deployed, artificial intelligence and other technologies can be a powerful force for good in our world. They can be used to answer fundamental questions about human health, including early detection of diseases such as cancer and heart disease, enabling life-saving interventions at ever earlier stages. These technologies can help unlock new solutions that accelerate human prosperity. With 27% of workers in advanced economies and high exposure, high complementarity occupations poised to reap productivity and economic benefits from AI, a future where we all efficiently work away while driving down highways chauffeured by driverless cars is a much closer reality than once seemed possible. As these technologies rapidly roll in and out, benefit wealthy nations, now is a critical moment to ensure equitable access around the world so we don't deepen the digital divide. This is why I think, open source technologies, open source AI is so important to give free access to, the ChatGPTs of the world, but in their decentralized, open source versions. This inclusive progress is perhaps nowhere more important than in global nutrition, a sector in deep need of scalable solutions given 40% of the planet cannot afford a healthy diet, and malnutrition is the leading cause of death and ill health globally. Early applications, mostly in wealthy nations, are extremely promising. AI is being used to recognize different dishes, calculate prices, provide nutrition information, and complete transactions in catering services, using deep metric learning to accurately identify each dish in just 0.3 seconds. And AI-powered apps like Fujicate are helping people track what they're eating, see the nutritional profile of food, and receive recommendations for those who diet-related diseases such as diabetes. When I'm looking at a dish, or I want to know how many calories are in an egg, or I want an idea of how to make a healthy meal at night, I will just pop into something like Perplexity or Claude or GPT-4 or, an open source model, whatever model, and just ask, hey, what can I do with these 3 or 4 ingredients? Or, hey, I want to have 4 eggs and a sausage for lunch. Can you tell me how many total calories this is? What's the fat profile? What's the protein content? Can you offer a suggestion? I'm trying to lose 15 pounds, right? These are things that you can just feed into the GPT, and it will just spit you back a response and educate you and incite you, right? Which it might not be so easy to do those things before. Now it's much easier, right? And this technology is empowering many, many different industries. This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just one example of AI making the world a better place. So let's move along here to 2 other opinion pieces. This next one up here is NFTs are the future of identification and record keeping. So here's an opinion piece by Nicholas Creel and Gavin Encroci. Despite being decades into the digital revolution, most of our official records remain stuck in a paper-based format, hardly different from what our grandparents used. Even our current digital documentation system is a mess, ensuring that our most important official records are hard to keep track of, a hassle to access, and terribly insecure. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, are the ideal means by which to revolutionize record keeping, offering us the opportunity to experience an easier, less expensive, and more secure way to store and document important records and identification. Granted, when many in the general public hear about NFTs, they think of them as little more than campy bored apes or cowboy Trump artwork. However, the reality is that with their unique properties, NFTs are the ideal digital format by which we can document and store our most important information. This new technology can replace the need for more traditional forms of documentation while making them more accessible and secure than ever before. It's very important that, a lot of these records and documents can be stored on a centralized ledger, a public ledger, or even in the case of a lot of government documents, it could be a version of a public/private ledger. Once these things are published on chain in a blockchain format as a non-fungible token, you have a record of when they were created at a time, and it's imposed in the documentation so it can't be altered or changed at a later date, right? Any update to that ledger or to that NFT, you could see it if it changed hands, right? If you had the title of a house or something like that and it was sold, right? You could see that initially on the blockchain. You could see it was sold. It was initially purchased at this time. This title was created and then it was sold, 5 years later at this time. And you can actually see that non-fungible token move from one ownership entity to another. That's incredibly useful, incredibly important, especially with transparency, with public things that are happening in documents. And when you have all these different centralized servers where they're not talking to each other, you can't see certain things, or a hacker could easily get in and delete documents or delete things or change things. With a blockchain, that's impossible, right? Because once you have something in that chain in a previous block, you have multiple blocks layered on top of it after, and you can always query and go back and look at that. Interesting concept here in regards to NFTs or non-fungible tokens. They have many use cases, and even though we make fun of here this cowboy Trump artwork and these bored apes, just owning that artwork, and if you can prove that you own that NFT, you have access, to a membership club or to different things, right? So again, look at the event at Mar-a-Lago a couple of weeks ago, where all of the Web3 community got to sit and talk to a former president and probably a future president, and talk about all of these concepts and all of these things, right? They got to talk about Web3. They got specialized access because they could prove that they own that non-fungible token, that document on the blockchain. How powerful and cool is that? Let's move along. Next up, this was probably my favorite article, story by Tim Ryan here. I read this and, I think I'm going to read the first paragraph like I did with the other articles, but I think something about this really spoke to me, especially the quote by JFK. So to avoid danger, U.S. must lead on crypto and blockchain. Opinion. Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the Industrial Revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it. That was President Kennedy more than half a century ago. Even then, he understood better than most what America's place in the world was bound up with our determination to be at the cutting edge of progress. We were a beacon of hope because the world knew that we would use our technological prowess to expand the rule of law and the basic human rights of all people. America's promise was to ensure that breakthroughs would be used for the good of humanity. Today, that same spirit still animates certain elements of progressive thinking. My fellow Democrats aren't trying to smother the emerging industry being born from artificial intelligence. They're trying to establish wise and fair rules that ensure both that it's deployed safely and that it benefits everyone, and not just the very well off. They're refusing to cede the advanced semiconductor industry to business overseas, helping instead to induce the industry to construct fabs domestically in places like my home state of Ohio. On a whole range of issues, Democrats are determined to keep America at the cutting edge. I can push back on that a little bit, but I'm not going to for the sake of this article. But when it comes to blockchain, namely the new technology promising to power a new, secure, decentralized, and transparent set of applications across a whole range of industries, many Democrats seem to have lost sight of Kennedy's admonition. Having convinced themselves that various misuses of blockchain obviate its underlying value, Senator Elizabeth Warren and her allies seem more interested in smothering innovation than harnessing its potential for the public benefit. While their concerns are understandable, their approach is fundamentally misguided. So, let me see here. This new law that Congress is debating and observing, realizing that everyone will benefit if Washington establishes clear rules of the road. Those who believe in blockchain are calling on Congress and the federal government's regulatory agencies to eliminate the ambiguity that threatens now to stymie future growth and innovation. But to date, Washington has failed to respond. Fortunately, Congress is now working to create the sort of regulatory regime that will do exactly that. A bill to ensure that crypto is not forced offshore, where American regulators are not able to protect the public from those looking to abuse it. A bill some of my former colleagues have drafted, known as FIT21, would make clear which among the bevy of federal financial agencies would oversee blockchain applications in the financial world, establish disclosure requirements to protect against a second FTX fraud, and set the guidelines required to maintain a safe secondary market for digital commodities. A group of young, smart progressives, including California Congressman Ro Khanna, are leading on this issue. They've aligned themselves with JFK and Democratic Party's old school, but to many of their progressive peers have yet to see the light. So this is an interesting article, kind of just talks about the idea of innovation and how the U.S. has always historically led on those things, whether it was John F. Kennedy talking about the space race, whether it's nuclear technology, whether it's, in later times, 40, 50 years later, the internet, now we're talking about AI. And though I disagree with some of the stuff that he said in this article, because it's still very early with AI, and I don't think we are doing certain things that are smothering the innovation in a lot of ways. We're trying to overregulate something where we don't know what the problems or the issues even are yet. We are doing a much better job with AI, I believe, than we are with crypto and Web3, right? And this is a big industry. Both industries are very big, and they both have very big applications, right? Because these technologies aren't just going to go away; they are going to go to the different jurisdictions, whether that be Hong Kong, whether that be Malta, whether that be the Cayman Islands, whether that be Europe, whether that be Germany, whether that be Russia, whether that be anywhere, right? Dubai, Qatar, Japan. There are going to be places that are going to want to incentivize these entrepreneurs, these developers, and these creators. And there's really no reason it shouldn't be the United States. And it's very disappointing to see what's been happening behind the scenes the past couple of years, the past 4 years of this administration, right? We talked a lot about Choke Point 2.0 and all of these things, whether it's Gensler, scheming with Warren behind the scenes, all of this stuff is just unacceptable in America, in my opinion. So FIT21 it kind of provides the rules to the road, which gives companies security and allows free markets to flourish, right? It's just a little bit of rule setting and guidelines, and that way companies and entities can know what is okay, what is not okay, right? I think we do absolutely need some of this. We need regulation for centralized companies, right? This FTX behavior by Sam Bankman-Fried, the behavior by a lot of these by CEO, by this Mashinsky guy, a lot of these things, a lot of these problems could have been solved if there was clear regulations and clear oversight of these different companies that are taking millions, if not billions, of customer funds, right? If you're custodying customer funds, you absolutely should have to follow a type of regime. A lot of the way that banks are regulated, right? Which is a big part of why this whole SAB 121 thing made no sense. Why they didn't want these regulated custodians to have access to custody these things, right? If they want to protect people, they should absolutely, if that's what they believe, that there should be rules and guidelines, then why not allow some of the most heavily regulated entities on the planet to participate in that custodialship for consumers, right? Instead, we've got shady operations doing a lot of this, and people like Sam Bankman-Fried that have really put a bad name to the industry because there is no oversight there is no regulatory regime that is overseeing these centralized companies and centralized entities. At the same time, we should encourage freedom and innovation and technology and development, right? Things that are not centralized should not be treated like centralized entities, right? So there is a middle ground here. And I think he actually quotes this here at the end. He says, President Kennedy made it clear that there exists a middle way. We can harness the best of blockchain, precluding our adversaries from developing it offshore and protecting the public from abuse. But to do that, we will have to create a clear and transparent regulatory regime to keep watch on its development. FIT21 will allow a technology potentially as transformative as AI to grow safely here in the United States. Here in the end is another opportunity for American to lead. I just hope my fellow Democrats are on the right side of history. President Kennedy would want it that way. And I think this is a fantastic write-up here. And Tim Ryan is a member of Coinbase Global Advisory Policy Council and co-chair of the Blockchain Innovation Project. He is a senior advisor of the Progressive Policy Institute's Campaign for Working Americans. So fantastic article here. I don't agree with everything that Tim Ryan wrote here, but I think that he largely strikes the right tone and hits. And this is probably my favorite opinion piece that I've read in the past couple weeks. I think he just kind of like threads the needle here and it explains things exactly right. So love to see it. And let's move on to our X Factor takes of the day. And first up, we will go right into discussing FIT21 a little bit further, which is this bill that's percolating in DC. And Ryan has some interesting takes on it, as he always does. So he goes, number 1, the FIT21 vote this week will be a big one in DC. We'll see if crypto remains a partisan football. It's a legacy-defining moment for Representative Maxine Waters. Waters' vote will likely make or break Hakeem Jeffries' chance at Speaker of the House for the next Congress. There's 3 things you should know about the political dynamics of this vote. I'll unpack them all. As Waters goes, so goes the Dem conference. Liz Warren's SAB 121 rebuke opens the door for a potential landslide FIT21 win. The truth is that Waters and McHenry have had a cordial relationship and worked productively together for many years. Their approach to crypto has legitimately been a good faith bipartisan effort. Sam screwed it up. SBF was a master at the DC game, but his FTX fraud burned our DC friends. It allowed adversaries like Liz Warren to attack and forced allies like Waters to retreat. Waters faced pressure to step away from FIT21 when FTX collapsed and the GOP took control of the House. This has led to a dynamic I've written about. Liz Warren shrieks about crypto being evil. Her henchmen, staffers, and the Biden admin apply pressure from all angles. That leads to anti-crypto calls from the White House to House leaders like Waters. Sand in the gears. Warren's opposition to crypto is so effective because it's mostly indirect. The White House and major financial regulators won't even field phone calls from the industry because of her pressure, and they rebuffed all meeting requests with the 40-plus founders who visited the Capitol during Coinbase's Stand With Crypto campaign this September. Even House Democrats who have the audacity to work across the aisle faced negative campaigns from the press and her many administrative proxies. Case in point, House Financial Services ranking member Maxine Waters, who's 180 on the bipartisan stablecoin and market structures bill, immediately followed calls from Warren's White House staffers. More in Chapter 5, as a senior House Democrat leader explained in private this fall. A lack of support from Waters is a death knell for 2024 legislative hopes, as it would A, signal to the broader House Democratic caucus that even bipartisan crypto bills shouldn't be broadly supported in a floor vote, and B, give the Democrat-controlled Senate and the crypto-hostile banking committee the air cover needed to fully ignore any House-passed bill. This is probably word for word the most precise political analysis I have written. So why drag leader Rep. Jeffries into this? I had the opportunity to look him in the eye, explicitly call out the Warren-White House-Waters dynamic and ask a question. He said it would take time plus effort to bring Maxine Waters around. I wrote about the exchange. I highlight that exchange for 2 reasons. One, Rep. Jeffries strikes me as a good, strong leader, even though I probably disagree with many of his policies. He defers to his committee chairs. One line stuck with me. He said that Waters was no shrinking violet. To laughs. Politics may be a team sport, but Representative Maxine Waters answers to no one in the Senate. That is why last week's SAB 121 pressure was so critical. It opened the door for bipartisan FIT21 vote. Liz Warren's anti-crypto crusade has been extremely costly for Democrats. They should be irate at her bad faith engagement with the crypto industry. It will cost them the Senate, likely the White House, but it might not cost them the House if FIT21 passes by 200 plus votes. I hope Representative Maxine Waters will support FIT21 and encourage her members to support it as well. The bill is unlikely to pass the Senate in its current form, but it will at least open up a critical debate between the 2 chambers to resolve crypto market structure regs in 2025. Moreover, the small act of bipartisanship will improve the odds of constructive stablecoin legislation passed this year as well. Representative Maxine Waters, I would be happy to meet with you or your team before the vote if you would like. I remain bullish. Same team, America. A nice little thread by Ryan Selkis. I think it really dives in and touches on all these different factors, what's going on with the power dynamics, the political dynamics. It's a nice little deep dive and insight into the politics around crypto and FIT21. That's upcoming this week to be voted on. Let's move along. Breaking. Judge rules Bitcoin pioneer and freedom fighter Julian Assange can continue fighting U.S. extradition. A win for free speech and freedom. So, good to hear that. Again, Julian Assange is somebody who should be celebrated for exposing many of the things that's happening behind the scenes and giving people freedom of information, right? Really showing people what's actually happening. He's done a lot on that front, and he was an early supporter of Bitcoin, part of the Cypherpunk'd movement. Ryan Sean Adams from Bankless, absolutely crazy for crypto in DC this next week. 3 big things. Biden veto SAB 121 repeal. He said he'd veto, but that was before a 60-38 vote where his own majority leader voted against him. He has 10 days. Number 2, Gensler approve ETH ETF. Everyone thinks no, but that was before Dems caught wind their anti-crypto SEC chair could lose them. I think this is going to be the biggest one to follow this week, and there's been a lot of movement, a lot of price movement today around Ethereum based on the fact that the odds have gone up that they will actually approve the ETF. Well, it's going to be a difficult battle for them in court to deny it. They're going to get sued. They're going to lose again, like they've lost most of their other court cases. And they're going to end up having to approve it anyways. Why not save everybody time and money and save the American taxpayer tons of money? Especially when this issue is now going to cost you guys a major loss come November. When I say you guys, I mean the Democratic Party and Gary Gensler and all of the Liz Warren cronies, Marty Gruenberg, all of them. This is a opportunity for them to stop some of the bleeding, because this is going to happen in America at some point anyway. People are going to be able to trade an Ethereum ETF because this is America, and there's really no justification not to allow that, or at least no justification that's going to hold up in court. Number 3, House vote yes to FIT bill. Major crypto legislation FIT bill led by pro-crypto R contingent goes to House vote by Thursday. Will it pass? Who's pro-crypto? Who's anti-crypto? My take on this FIT bill is I think it will pass. I think, you're going to have some bipartisan support here, and I think it would be stupid for any Democrat not to cross the aisle and vote on this issue. We are going to see this pass. Now, whether it clears the Senate, that's to be determined, but I think in the House it will clear. Who's pro-crypto? Who's anti-crypto? Next week, we'll answer the question for November. The politicians are jockeying. Some are paying attention to crypto for the first time ever. We're gaining momentum. Crypto is an election issue. It absolutely is an election issue. Let's move on to our next take here, and this is another one from Ryan Selkis. The pressure campaign is working. Senator Sherrod Brown is on the run. He knows that Elizabeth Warren's disastrous and unnecessary anti-crypto crusade is going to cost him his Senate seat. And for what? So here's a post by Nick Timmeros, and he says, Sherrod Brown, the Democratic chair of the Senate Banking Committee, says Marty Gruenberg shouldn't remain as chair of the FDIC. He doesn't call on Gruenberg to resign, but he wants Biden to nominate a new chair. I think if you look at the allegations and all of the data against him of the 500 plus complaints of harassment and abuse, it's of no surprise that this individual should not be the chair of the FDIC anymore, especially after his history of unconstitutional actions when it came to Choke Point 1.0 in the Obama administration. Now he's back at it again after he lost in court and he was told not to do what he was doing behind the scenes. He is now engaging in the same behavior against cryptocurrency, which is just a total abuse of power. And I think that if you look at the way he's kept his house in order, you can see that it is a crumbling sham. Next up, probably nothing. Trending in Hong Kong, SAR, China, Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, we can see now that the Bitcoin ETF has been approved in Hong Kong, you can see that it's starting to gain some traction, start to get some excitement. And if we look at the market, it looks like all of the top blue chip crypto assets prices are on the rise, whether that be from the ETH ETF odds approval going up, but it's also the fact that there's a lot of convenient vehicles for efficient and fair and transparent investment to flow into these ETFs, which make it easy for a lot of people to access the underlying asset, right? Let's move on. Just in, U.S. Congressman Emmer says House Republicans will pass his anti-CBDC bill this week. The idea of a central bank digital currency is more than alarming. It is downright un-American. Largely agree with his take here. I think that it just offers more financial censorship and surveillance, and we've already seen the government massively abuse that, whether it comes to the FISA abuses, whether it comes to spying on everyday Americans. Thank you to brave heroes like Snowden and people like Julian Assange, who have largely exposed what our own government is doing in direct violation of the Constitution, right? The rights of the people shall not be infringed. The Fourth Amendment says that, you have the right to not have unreasonable searches and seizures, yet that is abused on a daily basis. And I think if we can't even agree on something like the Constitution, which is the founding document of this country, I think we have bigger, larger problems, right? And that goes for both sides of the aisle, right? Some of these things may not be convenient for big tech, and the Constitution wasn't written to make life easier for law enforcement and to make life easier for intelligence agencies that it never authorized in the first place. So as Benjamin Franklin said, those who trade freedom for security or safety usually end up with neither, right? And I think we're at that point. There are trade-offs to being a free individual. There are trade-offs to living in a free society. It might make it possible for more crimes to be committed or more things to happen, right? But those are trade-offs we make as free citizens and being, part of America, right? Being an American citizen and following following the Constitution. My company is a part of the Florida Bitcoin and Blockchain Association. We sort of wrote the law on this to ban a CBDC in Florida territory, right? So we were the first state to put forth that legislation, and it has largely been copied by many other states, which is fantastic and great. But now we're seeing that this is going to be put through the House of Representatives at the federal level. Thank you to the journalists at the following media outlets for covering the passage of the Bitcoin rights law. So, right, we got Forbes, Axios, CoinDesk, Decrypt Media, Cointelegraph, Watcher Guru, Bitcoin Newscom, Blockworks, BTCTN, Crypto News, Crypto Slate, Be in Crypto, and there's many, many more here. Here's a follow-up on the Ether ETF approval odds. So, James Seyfarth and I are increasing our odds of spot Ether ETF approval up 75%, up from 25%. So, hearing chatter this afternoon that SEC could be doing a 180 on this. It's because it's an increasingly political issue. I'm sad that it's come to this point that, just because it's a political issue, just because they realize it's going to cost them the election, they're now all of a sudden, going to approve this. This is how shit gets done in America when it comes to doing what's best for American citizens. Having an Ether ETF, which is completely transparent and public and allows people to participate in the market, literally satisfies every single one of their mission statements, right? But the fact that they're approving it is not because of that. It's because they're being forced to stop playing their little political game. US dollars and US treasuries. But this demand relies heavily on their no KYC nature. Catch 2022 for the US government. So if we zoom in here to Yan from Swan.com, Yan from Swan, I like that, Yan from Swan. Should change his Twitter name to Yan from Swan. Rereading at Gladstein's, what would it seem like if it seemed like the petrodollar system was coming to an end and the US knew it and was embracing crypto dollars as a replacement for pet design? I think it would look a lot like some of the stablecoins we are seeing today, exporting our inflation out into the world through making stablecoins available in hundreds of countries reach and driving up a demand for US treasuries by stablecoin issuers, which pushes down US cheap debt. Paul Ryan's recent comments show a clear understanding of this picture. So here it's quoted, and this is something that I've been saying for a long time. I've been speaking at some engagements privately about this. These stablecoin issuers come to and getting a small yield on that, but they are bringing liquidity and money. They're bringing a bid to these treasury auctions, right? So this is huge for the US. A smart game theoretical macro play here is embrace this, get as many dollars as you can out, because the future of finance is not just going to stay the way it is, right? Deep loans and lending and bonds and all concepts, derivatives, liquidity pools. I mean, I could go on and on and on, right? Of these different DeFi sort of Lego bricks and building blocks that are the crypto ecosystem. And a lot of them are, experiments that some are going to succeed, some are going to fail. That's just the nature of the beast. But that being, the world doesn't have a bank account. And half of the world is suffering from crippling bouts of inflation and hyperinflating currencies and, communist regimes and authoritarian regimes. Allow these individuals to set up an Ethereum wallet and have access to USDC or USDT. It enhances and enforces the dollar's dominance in this world, right? So here, Paul Ryan echoes this. He says, stablecoins legislation would be a good step to strengthen U.S. treasuries. Really, it's a win-win for not really understanding this is not good, right? Because so give them a way to hold dollars, right? This just makes sense. It's a stronger demand, and the companies that are issuing, these private companies, have rules and regulations, have rules of the road that they need to follow and observe them, and make sure they're following, make sure they have the attestation to reserves, make sure they're back, do all of those things. That's great for innovation. And all it does is those entities are going to turn around, go to the treasury and $1 trillion here. Let me buy treasuries with these $1 trillion, right? And because then that's their business model, right? They will make a small amount of APY or interest, on those treasury yields, right? And that's on trillions and trillions of dollars. That's a lot of money, right? That's billions of dollars of interest every year. So this is just a follow up on that. And it's really just good macro game theory, good policy for the dollar. If you believe in America, and you want to see the dollar dominance in America, to have dollar dominance bid on the dollar if they would just embrace it, right? But the trade-off here that's mentioned by Alex Gladstein is you're not going to, people want dollars, they want cash, they want, aspect of their life by monitored and censored by an authoritarian Orwellian regime of KYC, AML, all these different things, right? And it goes with any other technology, right? If this KYC, AML was even effective, then this would be a different conversation. But the fact is, it's not effective. It lets through 99% of the crime and all the bad stuff, and all it does is put a burden on honest, hardworking individuals, and it stifles innovation, stifles commerce, stifles spending, saving, business. It's really anti-American in a lot of ways, and it's very Orwellian. So that's the trade-offs. You have to give up some of that, right? And to go further into that point here, Nic Carter, it's been a reality of de-dollarization, but the facts are very clear. I expect the it's not happening people to pivot to it's happening, but that's a good thing imminently, right? So Balaji and Nick are pointing this out, that countries don't want to trade in dollars, right? A lot of countries are, instead of buying treasury reserves, they are reducing their purchases and they're selling off their treasuries, right? They don't want American debt anymore, right? When we're seizing reserves from countries, whether we believe in what they are doing or not, we are politicizing and weaponizing, money. And that is a one-trick pony. You can do that one time, but then these countries are not going to rely that they can be, de-dollar, right? What any of these regimes are doing, they want a neutral type of money. And we can see here that China is de-dollarizing, right? You're seeing what's happening here. They are reducing their, dollar reserves, and they're doing less and less trade in dollars, and they are exporting their yuan. They are doing more trade in yuan with all these countries all over the world. They're using less and less dollars, and it's just empirical evidence. You can see it right here, right? In countries like Russia and China, and countries where we might have a more adversarial relationship than a collaborative relationship with. They are some of the largest nations in the world, right? So they are not going to continue to rely and depend on the dollar if we can just seize their reserves, if we can just debank them, if we can do these things, right? So money should really be this more neutral tool, because at the end of the day, you lose that control anyway. When you use it one time, they are no longer going to slowly wean themselves off of using that type of money, and which ends up being worse in the end, right? You might lose the battle, right, if you didn't do these types of sanction regime and all this stuff. These things are just really not that effective. All they end up doing too is hurting the average small individual. They don't hurt the Kim Jong-uns of the world. They don't hurt the President X's or the President Putin's. They just hurt the little guy. That's really the crux of it, right? You just hurt the country of all the poor civilians and citizens who are living in the country, the kids, the elderly, all the people that live there. You just kind of carry in tyrants. So you're basically win the battle, but you lose the war, right? Because the preeminent currency used in trade. Now, less and less countries want to hold dollar reserves, and they want to hold U.S. treasuries on their balance sheet. So that's the thought process. That's the thoughts, and the data supports that, right? Those are these big picture, macro, game theoretical things that are playing out in real time that we're watching. Venezuela will disconnect all Bitcoin mining farms from authoritarian countries. You've got these centralized top-up controls here. So the Venezuelan government claims that their plan to disconnect all Bitcoin mining farms is due to their high electricity consumption, leading to frequent power failures in surrounding areas. The Ministry of Electric Energy say that this action will prevent disruptions in power supply, ensuring reliable service for all Venezuelans. So this is very, very foolish. And many of us know that have been following this podcast and who have been looking at the data. As that in Dennis Porter's words here, literally all they need to do is create a grid balancing program, an ancillary service, where they can call the miners and ask them to shut off during peak demand in return for lower rates, energy credits, etc. Wins for the grid, wins for industry, wins for taxpayers, right? Because more revenue going to these government or these co-op or these electrical companies means that they can expand into green and renewables. They can spend more money on the grid, and they can pass some of those savings from all the profits they're making on the Bitcoin miners who are using so much power 24/7. They can pass those savings on to the consumers, to the average little guy, right? And at the same time, they can utilize the flexible load balancing nature of Bitcoin mining, right, to incentivize them to just shut off whenever's necessary, right? And every single Bitcoin miner that's at scale, myself included, that I've talked to, any miner will gladly gladly press a button and shut off their power for 2 hours at peak for like a credit, an energy credit. Hey, just some energy credits, whatever that may be. Give me a slightly lower rate, right? And I'll shut off anytime you need me to, right? Instead of charging me 9 cents per kilowatt hour or 8 cents, whatever, charge me 7.5 cents, right? Or, I'm just using that rate as an example, right? And, because you're already that individual, that mining company is consuming so much more energy, they're using more energy, they're paying more money to these operators that it's like a business, right? They're your best customer. And, here's where you see the true incompetence of the Venezuelan regime and the Venezuelan government, just massively missing an opportunity here. And this is why countries, they are basically effectively banning an entire industry, a whole business, a whole group of entrepreneurs. Why would anybody in their right mind ever try to do business in Venezuela with a government like this? I mean, who can just arbitrarily ban an entire industry? And just the most basic due diligence to see that these power share programs and these grid balancing programs is just a simple solution that makes everybody happier and makes things better for everybody. I mean, it's just, you look at the level of incompetence and ignorance and, it's just an example of why communism fails at the end of the day, right? Because any private market individual could come up with this idea in about 5 seconds. And the data is clear. You can look at everything that's happening in all these other countries who are doing grid balancing. America, especially in places like Texas and all over North Carolina for myself, and many other grids all have that capability. Ryan Selkis, again, I think this is his third tweet today. He's really just, me and him are just really in sync. Here he's got, Gates tried to gate Web 1. I like that. Gates tried to gate Web 1. Zuckerberg tried to censor Web 2, a la Zuckerman and Sulzberger. Bankman tried to centralize Web 3. All false prophets, all Democrats. I'm starting to think Altman is not who we want at the AI controls. So this was a story that came out last week, and it's deeply, deeply disturbing, right? So again, so much for OpenAI. They just like the level of disconnect with reality, with the name of the company to all of the shady things that they're sort of doing here. If a departing employee declines to sign the document, or if they violate it, they can lose all vested equity they earned during their time at the company, which is likely worth millions of dollars. One former employee, Daniel Kokota, due to losing confidence that it would behave responsibly around the time of AGI, has confirmed publicly that he had to surrender what huge sum of money in order to quit without signing the document. Kind of wild here. So good for, I might not agree with Daniel or what he believes in, and basically, not trading his value, and good thing for him exposing this. I mean, this is just very Orwellian. I mean, I think the whole ethos and vision of this company named OpenAI is now closed source and doing all these things. It's like, it's just ridiculous, right? Not saying it's not a good business decision or whatever, but they were supposed to be this nonprofit with this idea to democratize and open source and allow take off the hood so people can look at these models and these things. They've just become this thing that's the complete, and even the name of this very Orwellian, why I'm so attracted to Web3, whether that be with AI, whether that be with blockchain, crypto, this idea of centralization, all these people, right? Because if you look at many charities, a lot of it is he's at this point where he just thinks he's almost a god, right? Where he thinks that he knows what's best for everybody. He's, it's just kind of crazy. And Zuckerberg is very similar in a way. I mean, if you read what he did to those, to the Winklevoss twins, if you read the whole story, if you look at some of the things that he wrote, right, he did not care what was ethical, as long as very disturbing things for someone who has such tremendous power to be saying, right? And if you saw what he did with the with all these election centers and ballot harvesting and all the stuff that he did in the election, right? He believes, he can just sort of, as long as it's legal, I can do it. This charity, as he calls it, right? Bankman-Fried did the same thing. They tried to come in and gatekeep the industry to stop competitors, right? They try to act like they're, for safety, for this, but then they gatekeep. Bankman was basically trying to do this. He had a bankless debate. I believe it was a bankless debate with, I want to say, Eric Voorhees, right before he finally got exposed as a fraud. He was basically trying to get DeFi to be regulated. So to basically protect his moat and his company and all the shady shit he was doing with customers' funds, right? He didn't want the open source alternative to these yield things. He did not want, DeFi contracts that are completely, hey, if you put your money in here and it sits here for a year, this is your APY. It's completely transparent. It's built into the code. He did not want those things to exist. He wanted everyone to be forced to go. He wanted to basically kill all of that innovation. So everyone would have to go to his platform and give him the money so he could then, rehypothecate it or do all the fraudulent things he was doing, right? So this is what these individuals do, these false prophets, right? That's as Ryan Selkis calls him here, right? So let's call a spade here. Now, although OpenAI and Sam Altman and these guys have done something incredible with the company, which was supposed to be a nonprofit, it doesn't mean that they are ethical. It doesn't mean that no matter how many podcasts they show up on, something my father always said, your actions speak so loud that I can't hear what your mouth is saying, right? This is kind of another example here of that. If this is, which is true, I mean, this guy gave up millions of dollars to expose this. I mean, who knows what kind of thing, what document this is? It just seems very secretive, very Orwellian. And this is why we need open source AI alternatives. This is why we need open source models. This is why we need transparency. And this is why OpenAI to begin with was formed as an open source company, right? It was a competitor to the exact thing that it has now become. I think that my favorite explanation from this is Elon. He says that, imagine donating to a charity that was supposed to protect the rainforest, and the rainforest and that charity takes your money and basically converts itself into a log cutting company that now cuts down the rainforest, right? I mean, that's essentially what has happened here, which is just deeply disturbing. And I think gotta keep calling it out because it's hypocritical, right? It really is. Lynn Alden, I remember back in 2020 and 2021, I kept being involved in debates about Web fueled all sorts of prices. Fun times. I can't believe, looking back from mid-2024, that so many people were arguing that it wasn't real money creation, that it wasn't going to lead to persistent inflation. Just listen to the low-yielding bond market and buy bonds. That is just temporary supply shots, etc., right? These are all the narratives that the cantillionaires and the mainstream media was putting out about all these mainstreams, the economists, the Paul Krugmans of the world, well, we won't see inflation, blah, 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 blah. It's just supply shock. It's just that and the other, right? Well, reality, they printed trillions and trillions out of thin air that was injected in the economy. And now we've seen and we're still seeing, 50-year level, high levels of inflation as goods are being repriced, right? So when inflation cools, it doesn't necessarily mean that prices are going back down to what they were before. It just means that they've stopped rising so fast. They've stopped rising at this massive rate. The cost of coffee or eggs, right? I mean, you saw the government statisticians last, I think they took out of the CPI calculation, inflating so fast that it would make inflation look worse. So they just, they kind of just like game these things to make it seem like whatever. You think you're looking at, from month to month, you think you're looking at, is an apple to an apple, but you're not comparing an apple to an apple, right? They are actively using and abusing statistics to try to sell a narrative to the American public, right? Oh, inflation's low, unemployment's this. They just change, they like gerrymander and change these metrics that they're not even recognizable. If you go look back at the metrics and the way they would measure these things in the 80s, they've changed so much that, is like, 15%. And what they're showing you is like 2 to 3% because they just take out all the stuff that's actually massively inflating. It's kind of wild. It's really crazy. And it's deceptive. It's very deceptive, right? It's very Orwellian and very deceptive. That's all I got for you guys today. Stay safe, stay blessed, never stop learning, and keep an open mind. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.